Larry goes out to eat with his friends, he usually orders last. Most of the time, he gets the same thing as someone else in his group. When Larry goes to the grocery store, he often asks a fellow shopper to read part of some food packaging to him, saying, "I'm sorry, I left my glasses at home this morning, do you mind?" And when Larry lost his manufacturing job, he went to the job center for help filling out applications, citing his poor internet connection at home. The truth is, Larry hides an important part of his life from almost everyone in it. Larry is illiterate. There are more than 36 million American adults just like Larry who read, write, and do math at or below a third grade level. That's greater than the population of every individual state except California and equal to roughly 10% of the US population. When we raise the bar to fifth grade proficiency, that figure rises as well to 20% of the US population. This is a national crisis. Illiteracy is a largely invisible issue, a dark undercurrent to our society that affects nearly everything from crime to poverty to health and more. One reason for this invisibility is that low literate adults often go to great lengths to hide it because they are embarrassed or ashamed. Human beings are creative and resilient, and we often find ways to work around our problems without actually solving them. Another reason illiteracy is invisible is because high school graduation rates don't tell us the whole story. A person can graduate while remaining low literate, and a person can drop out while perfectly competent. Everyone has a different school story. Everyone has a different relationship to literacy. I was lucky. When I was a kid, learning came easily to me, I did well in school, and I took it for granted. I even had my friends quiz me from the spelling bee booklets at sleepovers for many years, for fun. My poor friends. But it all paid off. This was me when I won the district spelling bee in 7th grade for the second year in a row. Look how happy I am. Until I saw that photo in the newspaper, I had no idea my face could look like that. I think every teacher I'd ever had gave me a copy of that in school the next week. You don't need to be a spelling bee champion to have literacy skills that you take for granted, though. Chances are, if you're a college graduate, you are surrounded in your personal life by other college graduates. It may be hard to visualize the true scope of the problem of adult illiteracy because it exists in pockets, because it is invisible, and because we tend to surround ourselves with people of similar education levels to our own. I work at an adult literacy center here in Dayton, and one common incorrect assumption that I have run into is that adults who don't or can't read well chose that path for themselves, that they were too lazy or too apathetic to do well in school the first time around. This is simply not true. For one, everyone has different reasons for being at the levels they are, and for another, adult learners are some of the most motivated, hardworking people you could ever meet. A few years ago, 72-year-old twin sisters, Mary and Martha, came to the Literacy Center because they had a goal. They wanted to read their mail. Take just a second and think about how much you take for granted your ability to read the mail that comes to you. Think of the piles of junk mail, the credit card applications, the flyers and forms and advertisements that you toss aside without a second thought. Mary and Martha couldn't do that. They had grown up in a sharecropping family in Georgia and were only allowed to go to school on days that it rained because it was only then that they weren't needed in the fields. So, Mary and Martha started from the ground up with basic letter recognition at age 72. A few months later, they walked in through the front doors, smiling from ear to ear and waving a piece of paper. The sisters had just been told that they wouldn't get their regular Meals on Wheels delivery over the Labor Day weekend due to the holiday schedule. They didn't care about the food. All the sisters cared about was that they could read that notice. They were thrilled, they were proud, they felt accomplished, and they were the furthest thing from ashamed. When was the last time you were that excited about being able to read something? For Mary and Martha, and for all of us, the ability to read is an absolute game changer. Being able to read and write actually changes the way we think. Literacy expert Walter J. Ong described the ways in which writing restructures human consciousness. Writing is detached from the writer, unlike speech, which is immediately attached to the speaker. By learning how to read the written word, we learn how to separate ideas in time, and we learn that it is possible for ideas to endure beyond the moment that they're first thought of. Case in point, I didn't need to meet Mr. Ong to learn what he thought. I could read his book instead, and this changes how we think. Many complex mental processes are involved when we read. As babies, we first experience language as sounds that carry meaning. And when we learn how to read and write, we learn that those sounds can have physical representation as symbols on a page. Reading relies on reversing this order, on turning symbols back into sounds, back into meaning. The two main cognitive building blocks involved with reading are comprehension and decoding. Comprehension comes first. That's our ability to understand the meaning behind the words. And this meaning is always made up of many parts: definition, tone, context, relevance, formality, and many more. A more subtle aspect of comprehension is the ability to infer, to read between the lines and hear what isn't said. Decoding comes next. Decoding is our ability to process language by recognizing its component parts. This is where breaking words down, sounding them out, and noticing patterns in spelling and meaning come into play. Becoming a better reader really means developing these decoding skills. Words and sentences have endless combinations once we realize that we are just rearranging the same elements over and over and over again. For people who don't acquire this understanding earlier in life, everything is harder, because what's really missing is that ability to transfer knowledge from one context to another. When you have literacy skills, you probably have no clue how much you read every day. When something is familiar to you, it registers faster. So the more you see certain signs, signals, and messages, the more they sink into the background, so your brain can focus on aberrations from those norms. Instead of having to figure out consciously, while going 60 miles an hour down the highway, that sign over there says no edge lines, you can focus on your car's position on the road, keeping yourself and everyone around you safer. Literacy is like this in all aspects of life. It becomes an automatic process, so we can focus on what's really important. Keeping up with the news, applying for jobs, taking medicines properly, handling money responsibly, and of course, staying connected with our friends, families, and communities. When any one of us is less able to do any of these things, it threatens everyone's well-being and our society's stability, often in ways you wouldn't think of. For example, children of low literate parents have a 72% chance of being at the lowest literacy levels themselves. Breaking this cycle is essential. Literacy is essential because literacy is the tool that allows us to take everything else for granted. Literacy enables us to participate in all of life. The good news is that the flip side of this cycle is true as well. Literacy is a value that sticks with people. I grew up in an Air Force family, and when we got stationed in Dayton, it was just a couple weeks later that my parents took us to the downtown library branch to get our library cards. In all the chaos of moving, books and stories were a form of stability, comfort, and connection, and that has always remained with me. And last month, in the beautiful new building at that same location, I married the love of my life in that library. More importantly, Martha, one of the two sisters I told you about earlier, continues to come to the Literacy Center. Her sister has passed away, but Martha comes every week and still works with her original tutor. 4 years ago, Martha couldn't read her mail. Today, Martha is writing her life story, chapter by chapter. Our words and our ideas have the power to outlive us. When we read, we enter into conversations we didn't even know were happening. When we write, we create something for the future, for people we've never met and will never meet, an act of hope. Literacy is connection across time and across place. Literacy honors human dignity and gives us hope for a better world, one that we can create together, chapter by chapter.